We're going to take this drawing. We're going to tape it down on our desk. I'm about to do that. And then we're going to put another piece of tracing paper over it. I'm going to focus on just the circled area so that we can go through a couple different variations of this in the time that we have. Now, I usually do this with my yellow trace, but I'm going to try it with this white trace I found when I was cleaning out my office. We'll see how it does with markers. Go ahead and lay a piece of trace over your drawing. You'd like a piece of trace. Hang on. Get this set up. So we've got the trace over our drawing. Let me see where I've taped mine down here. First, we're going to grab a green. And I'm going to go ahead, if you got the Copic ones that I said to get, there's my pea green, which may or may not be alive. I might try moss, but we're going to see what happens. All right, I'm going to start with my pea green. Pea is in the fruit and vegetable. And I'm going to color all the areas within inside the circle that need grass. And I'm just going to go just laying down my first wash. This pea green marker might be dying on me. It was dead earlier today, but I filled it full of alcohol. And hopefully, oops, I've already made a mistake. So don't fill in the house. We're just doing the grass. I'm going to go ahead and go over the mulch beds because I've already did that once. We'll just continue to do it. Leave the lake. Try and feather it out when you're going off the page, out of the circle. Again, I'm using just a broken line wash on it. If you go outside of the lines a little bit, it's not the end of the world. I'm trying to keep the pavement and sidewalk. Like I said, I went right over the mulch beds. I'm just going around the lake because I want to keep open. You start to see why we're going to need our light greens a lot. And these are the washes that kill your markers, because you're doing the whole darn page. Okay, so I've laid down green all over everything. You can see the marker's starting to get a little tired in through here. I'm going to go ahead and just finish out the trees that are halfway in the page. Totally up to you what you want to do with that. So I got one right there. I'll just put him in there. Put him in there. Okay, if you want to stay solely inside the circle, you can. I threw a couple. If the trees were half in, half out of the circle, I'm going ahead and just doing those trees. Okay. Again, try and feather it out. Now, what you want to do is let that marker sit a little. Here. I'm going ahead and just putting some stipples all along the outside edge so there's no real hard edge of color. Good. Okay, let that marker cool down for a few minutes. Oh, we'll be going over it a couple times, but you're just putting one layer down now. And then let that marker sit aside and let it start to settle in.
I wonder which green I should use.
Yeah, I would try your lightest one first, see how that one works.
So this one.
Yep, I would try it and see how it goes. All right, now I've got my light blue, which here's a good example. I'm going to do the pond in light blue. And you're going to say, but I can't even see it. Okay, you can kind of see that I did that in blue. Now what does that blue look like on bond? Notice the difference? Right, so on tracing paper you get real subtle colors. I'm going to set that marker up here so I remember where it is. I'm going to start, I want to do my big areas, so I am going to go back at that green. What I want to do is I want to do all the trees with a second coat. Just the trees. Yeah, my pea green markers about done. Now, it's not a huge difference between one layer and two. That's okay for now. Okay, I've done my second layer over the trees. I'm going to grab a darker blue. If you have a medium-ish blue or a dark blue. I usually check the colors up in the corner. Try to get a sense. You can see that one's a little darker. On Bond, it's a lot darker. But here we're going to try a little of that blending technique. All I want to do is I want both these markers available right away. So I got them both open. I'm going to put just a couple dots of blue up top here. And then I'm going to grab my light blue and I'm just going to kind of tap it and smudge it around a little bit. You can kind of see the effect there. So I'm going to do that largely around the perimeter of my lake. So I put a few dots of the dark blue. Right away I grab the light blue and kind of work it. Drag it out towards the middle of the lake. What you're trying to avoid is a real sharp line where the dark blue was. Just do a little bit at a time. And this works really nicely on tracing paper. You'll find you won't get that same result on bond paper, just your regular white copier paper. Just try and immediately go for the edge. Kind of pull it away from the dark blue, then push it back in. And you get a real nice little watercolory flavor to it. Are they working okay? Good. Well, it's coming. See if I kind of put a couple dots down of the dark blue and then hit it immediately with the light. Pull it away and then push it back. You just kind of get this
Yeah, that's nice.
water. It's like a watercolor wash. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. Let's do small sections at a time. Oh, I like hearing all that stippling. Okay, so I've gone largely around the whole lake and I've got this kind of feathered watercolory feel to it, which is kind of a nice look. Now, I'm going to grab my middle of the road green. If you're using the Copics, I think that is going to be moss. That's moss on white paper. There's moss on tracing paper. Here, I'm going to do it up here so you can actually see it. Okay, so I'm going to do a little more than half of the trees. I'm going to do a big tree. I'm going to do this one right here. So what I want to do is I want to do at least the back half of the tree. See how I put that middle in there and I kind of puddle it? And then I'm going to go kind of a curvy around that. Now I don't know how well that's showing. You can start to see it. But we're doing it, remember the sun's coming from here. So do the big trees first. Just put that puddle layer in there. Now, it's probably not showing up real well, so let's try this. What I did, yeah, that's the end of the pea green. Okay. Imagine that being one tone without a dead marker. I almost got a drawing out of it. All right, so what I'm doing next is if you kind of picture a line going right through that part of the tree. I want to go and then I'm going to put a little bit of a bump like that. Kind of see that shape? So there's the original tree. I want for my second layer, I want kind of a shape like that, kind of like a moon with the dark going back on it. And it doesn't show up super well on this tracing paper, but that's okay. It does show up a little. I've done that guy 4 times. You know, as long as you get the bottom half done, or a little more than the bottom half, okay, so I put that second coat on all the trees, taking up about 3/4 of the tree with my medium green. I'm now going to grab my dark green, the darkest one I've got, which I think is the pine tree green. Okay, and now I'm going to do, again, I'm showing you on this one, I'm just going to do a little circle, a little crescent on the back. So something like that. And you can see that my dark green goes on the back. And I'm going to go through the trees and I'm going to try and just put that on there. And I'm puddling it while I'm doing it. back side of these trees. Looking around to see if I missed any. No, I pretty much got them all. So now I've got 3 layers of green on these trees. If I slide a piece of paper under there, of course it's going to be difficult. Maybe I'll have better luck from the bottom, but maybe not. There we go. That's what we've got so far in the, you can put a white piece of paper under there. That's what you're going to wind up with. Again, it's pretty subtle. So now, all I've really got left to do is I've got my driveway, I've got my patio, I've got my steps. Now, what I do with the and, oh good, I do have a property line in here. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, for the driveway and the steps, I'm going to use the lightest gray I have. If it's the Copics, it's the Cool Gray 3. Okay, that's what it looks like on paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm just putting a hint of it in the corners of the driveway, like where I put my little dots and stipples before. And I mean about like this. Just a little in the corners. Feather it out. You can put a little there. Just look for the stipples that I put in the drawing to know where I want to put it. And again, I'm just putting a hint of it there. For the concrete on the walkway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to like alternate every other step of the, I got this little grid in there. Do like, every other one, or kind of a little checkerboard pattern. I don't want you to cover the whole thing in gray. I want you to leave some white space there. So I just did, this is probably going to be harder, but I'm going to try it. I got lucky. You can barely see it, but there's that gray in there, there's a little gray there, there's a little gray there, little on the steps. For the patio in the back, where I've got some stones, I'm going to grab a tan. Let's start with dull ivory and see where that goes. I'm going to put a little dull ivory in there. It's just a light, that's about the lightest tan I have. Again, fill in a couple of these dots. You can go ahead and just, where I put the bricks and a little around the perimeter and by the edge of the house, just put a little in there. So that's what I've done now. Is my large flat areas I've got colored in. So I do want to add a couple little, just a couple little character spots. Oh, I've got one other thing to do, my mulch. And I'm going to do that in my burnt umber, which is my darker brown. And all I'm going to do is put a couple dots on the walkway, the patio. Just filling in a couple of those squares, and I'm going to go over it with that dark ivory just to soften it up. Puddle it up a little bit. You can kind of blend it down to just a medium brown. As opposed to just having those dots. It's kind of like what we did with the pool.
So you're just doing the corners, or you just doing it
Yeah,
all around?
pretty much where I had the stones.
Okay.
I'm just putting a little bit in there. All right, around the mulch, I'm going to take that same dark ivory. I'm going to use just the tip of it and just kind of stipple it around. And I might even do the same thing with that, where I go over it with the dull ivory to kind of soften it a little bit. Just to make a little brown. It's going over the green, so it's couple little dots. Whoops. If you want to use the brush end, you can. If you've got a double end. You don't have to. I can do it with the wide end of the marker I just did. And let's just it's just nice to be able to kind of smudge out those. Gives you just an uneven tone in there, which is what I'm shooting for. Put a couple dots in, put a couple dots in, put a couple dots in. And then fill it in with, oh, I don't want to use that. If you make kind of a little circular motion with the lighter marker, you can kind of just give it a nice feather. You can push it back and forth. Every time I grab the wrong end. Which is kind of sad because there is a picture of which end to grab. All I would have to do would be to look at it. Sorry, I'm using the brush on this one. I'm going to add a little in there. I like a little more there, a little more there. Nope. All right, so I've just done all the mulch beds. I've got left one of my favorite parts, which is the property line and the scale. But I'm going to use my red. What happens is, because we have so much green going on in these, and I'm going to do that red. Kind of is nice to punch it out a little bit. To be honest with you, we're pretty much done with color with one exception, and that is one I'm not going to put down yet. That's the yellow flash in the trees. Once you've got that color down, the next step is you have to redo all the ink work on the drawing. So break out your thin Sharpie, and I want you to watch what happens. You can kind of see what this looks like now. I'm just going to do the pond for now. All right, notice how much that pond started standing out. Now I'm going to grab a couple of these trees using the same.
Thin Sharpie, right?
Thin Sharpie. Okay, compare those trees to the other trees. The other trees just kind of look like green blobs. But when we go around the ink work with our thin line for now, we'll get the fat Sharpie later, but we Okay, before I do all of it, I want you to see in a minute. I'm gonna do this clump. Again, I cheated on some of the clumps. I eliminated some of the trees. I just wanted the ones. All right, I'm just going to do some of the grass because I want to show you. This would be a great opportunity for you folks to trace some of my grass. Got a little hard edge stuff that I'm going to put in there. And use my straight edge, not freehand, for the hard edges of the building and that back patio. I'm not going to do the whole house yet. I will do the whole house, but I wanted to just show you, I want to do a before and after scenario so you can see what I'm doing here. Only using my fat Sharpie for the profile line, and I will be using it for the shadows. I'm going to profile my house, but I'm only doing part of it. Let that dry a little. Put in some more grass lines.
Like the big one or the small one?
What's that?
For the outside,
For the thicker line is just the outside edge of the building and the shadows when we get to them, which I'll be doing momentarily. All right, so, oh, I got a mulch bed I missed. And I'm not going to do that one yet, but yeah, I guess I am. Okay, I almost forgot one of my favorite red parts. The scale and the north arrow. I'm going to go ahead and just put some red in there. Just in the circle. Well, those are crisp lines, so we're going to use our tools. I'm actually just going to do this. Okay, the reason I did that is 'cause I wanted to show you why we put the line work down, and I think you're getting it. Oh, and I gotta do the shadows, but I'll do that in a minute. Can you kind of see the difference between where I put in the line work and where I didn't? And I meant to put in my tree shadows, which will make these things pop a lot. And there would actually be a shadow here. And there'd be line work. I'm going to finish all the line work. But you kind of see why I put that line work in. I mean, it makes all the difference, and it means you have to trace over every single line we put in there before in the black and white drawing. So I'm going to finish that up with the line work and the shadows. And then I've got one last thing to do, but I'll do that. Let me get the rest of the trees done. Because I put in the yellow flash, which you haven't seen yet, but you will. Here, let me do this building, so I want to get that done.
That's the thing, Sharpie?
That is the only place for the thick Sharpie is the profile line of the building and shadows. So yes, this is all thin Sharpie work. Let that settle down for a minute. That settled down. just doing all the line work over again. And it's just a trace job. I've got to put my shadows in. I've got a couple trees left to do. I got to put my shadows in the trees. I will probably put a line for the property line. I'm double lining all the pavement. That's done. Trees. Just got a couple trees left to go. All right, got to dry a little. Do the rest of my grass lines.
When are you doing these on the internet?
Not tonight, not for next week. Next week you'll be tracing over those two plans. And there'll be full plans, so all right, shadows on the trees, property line, and then I've got one last thing to do. Got 'em all. Okay. property line, I am gonna put a dark line in there. I'm trying to match up with. But I'm using the technique of not putting it through the road. Last thing I do, this is where you're going to need either a yellow pencil or I use my magic sticks, but a yellow prism, I'll just use a yellow prism. This is the yellow flash. I use Prismacolors. If you've got some other yellow colored pencil, that'll work. It has to be a pencil. It has to be something that'll go over the marker. A yellow marker won't do anything. But all I want to do is put a little flash of yellow in these trees. All right, it's not much, but let's take a look at, I'm going to do this blob and not this blob. And you're just putting some yellow on where the sun shines, and you can kind of see the difference. Well, it's coming loose. It's a subtle thing, but you can see the difference where the yellow is here, where it's not there. It does make the trees stand out a little more. So I put my yellow flash, and I do it last because if you do it before you do your Prismacolors, before you do your pen lines, your pen won't write over this. Prismacolors are wax-based ink, and even your Sharpie pen will have a tough time drawing over it. So I do it last. And like I said, I'm doing it now with a pencil for most of these, but what I would typically do, if you're blessed enough to have a yellow stick, it's a lot quicker to just do it with the stick. Just grind it right in there. Done. And there's the finished, oh dear. Sorry about that. You folks didn't tell me that the camera had gone crazy. But there's the finished drawing. Now I can look at yours.